January of 1880-7 found the town of Cedar Hollow more bones than flesh. Half the buildings on the South Road were nothing but blackened timber from a fire the spring before, and the rest leaned like drunks into the wind, windows gaping with stripped gray. The people who stayed didn't speak much unless it was to name the dead or curse the weather. The wind that swept through the valley came straight from the mountains, slicing down the slopes like it headed it to collect. Even the horses leaned into it when they walked, as if bracing for something worse. Martha Lorne stood at the edge of the frost-bitten field behind her cabin, her arms wrapped around her middle, her coat thin as paper. The snow had crusted overnight, turning soft shapes into something sharp and blinding. It squeaked under her boots, a low dry groan that seemed to echo back at her. Behind her, the cabin stood squat and silent. Smoke crawled weakly from the chimney. Her youngest had a cough that had settled deep in his lungs 2 nights ago, and Ched burned the last of the good kindling, trying to keep the stove hot through until morning. The barn door had blown off in the night, and the cow had stood shivering in her stall, eyes rolling, sides heaving with fright. Martha's face was drawn tight, not with age, but with months of stretching herself to thin. Her husband had died in April, a timber fall, quick and messy. She hadn't cried much. Counting. There hadn't been time. There was the land to settle and mouths to feed. 5 of them. Mary, Henry, little Ruth, Eli, and baby Amos. They stared at her every day like they didn't know what was holding them upright but her. Her hands were red raw from the cold, cracked at the knuckles. The last time Ched looked at herself in the mirror, Ched barely recognized the face that stared back. Her hair, once dark and thick, hung limp and straight with gray. Her eyes looked older than her 30-2 years. She didn't expect the world to give her anything. But this winter had taken too much. It had taken her sleep, her strength, and now, slowly, it was taking her hope. The wind picked up again, cutting across the field, rattling the bare branches like bones. She turned away from it, hugging herself tighter, blinking against the sting in her eyes. It was only wind, but it felt like spite, like something alive and watching, waiting for her to slip. She paused at the cabin's door before going back in. The hinges ground. Inside, the air smelled of ashen sickness. Amos was fussing in his basket, his small fists jerking against the blankets. She crossed to him, laying a hand on his forehead. Still warm. Too warm. The others were still sleeping on the floor under quilts, huddled together like pups. Henry had his arms slung over Ruth protectively. Mary's face was pale against the fabric of the blanket, her lips parted just enough to breathe through. Martha crouched and fed another stick of wood into the stove, watching the flames catch slow. Her knees cracked as she stood again. She hadn't eaten since yesterday, not really. Just a crust of bread and some thin broth. The shelves were nearly bare. She had 2 tins of beans, a sack of flour with maybe 2 good scoops left, and a jar of lard. She pressed a hand to her stomach, which clenched and twisted with hunger and fear. Outside, something shifted, a sound not of wind or wood but of hoofbeats. She froze. It was too early for riders, and too late for anyone just passing through. Anyone who had somewhere to be had already hunkered down days ago, waiting for the blizzard they all knew was coming. And no one came up this way without a reason. Hurlin sat 3 miles off the road. Nothing but rocks and scrub between here and the valley fort. She stepped to the window, brushing the frost with her sleeve. A single rider, hunched against the cold, head low. A dark shape on a lighter horse, moving slow, real slow. For a second, she couldn't tell if it was man or shadow. He was coming this way. She felt for the shotgun by the door, fingers numb against the stock. She hadn't fired it since last spring, but she would, whatever was coming. She'd meet it at the threshold. She'd seen too much to back away now. The rider came on without hurry, which unsettled her more than if he'd been in a rush. That kind of slowness in this cold meant one of 2 things: he was half-minus dead already or too sure of himself to care. Martha kept the shotgun across her chest, barrel low but ready. The horse stopped a few yards from the porch. It was a gelding, pale with age and frost, flanks rising and falling fast, steam coming off its back. The man stayed seated a moment longer, as if gathering himself. Then he dismounted stiffly, landing hard and favoring his left leg. Snow clung to his coat in thick sheets. His hat was pulled low, scarf wound high. All she could see was the cut of his jaw and the dark of his eyes. "You alone?" he asked. Martha didn't answer. He didn't move closer. "I ain't looking for trouble," he said. His voice was rough with cold, not unkind. "Just saw smoke. My horse is near give out. I need to warm him and maybe trade for water if you've got it." He wasn't armed, or if he was, he kept it hidden. That didn't mean much. "You a lawman?" she asked, voice steady. He shook his head once. "Name's Cal Danner. Was heading north. Got turned around. I can pay." That word made her stomach twist. "There's no pay left in these hills," she said. "Just bad ground and worse timing." The wind rose, snapping the corner of the porch top. He stood there, snow blowing around him, a still shape against a white world. Not shivering, not pleading, just waiting. She hated that the silence between them felt familiar somehow. She lowered the shotgun. "Barn's there," she said, nodding toward it. "No door, but it's shelter. You can water him from the trough if it ain't froze solid. You can have a place to sleep in the hay, not inside." He gave a slow nod. "Appreciate it." He led the horse past her, careful not to look her way again. Martha closed the door with her foot, locking it behind him. She didn't trust him, but she hadn't heard any lies in his voice either. He didn't sound like a man who needed anything beyond what he'd said. That scared her too, somehow. A man who didn't need much had nothing to lose. Inside, Amos had fallen asleep again, his breath rasping soft and quick. The stove gave off just enough heat to hold back the frost creeping in from the walls. She moved slowly through the room, checking each of the children. Ruth stirred when Martha tucked the blanket tighter around her. The girl blinked up once, her lips moving. "Mama, is the wind gone?" "No, baby," Martha whispered. "Not yet." Outside, she heard the muted thud of boots in snow, the faint clink of tack, then the sound of the barn latch swinging, banging against the wall. He was doing what H.E.D. said. Still, she kept the shotgun near. Later that night, when the children had eaten the last of the cornmeal mush and were curled up again, she slipped outside in her coat and boots. The cold bit at her immediately. Ice crystals floated in the air, catching the faint light like dust motes. The barn smelled of old straw and animal warmth. Cal Danner sat near the back, wrapped in his coat, his legs stretched out. His horse dozed nearby, half minus covered in a blanket he must be brought with him. He looked up when she entered. "You come to shoot me after all?" "Thought I'd see if you froze yet," she said. He didn't smile, but something eased in his face. "You'll be gone come first light," he said. "Didn't mean to spook you. Just bad luck all around." Martha leaned against the post. "Luck's got nothing to do with the wind or men finding their way to places they don't belong." He nodded slow. Fair. Silence stretched between them, the kind that didn't feel heavy, just wide. "You lose someone?" he asked. She flinched before she could help it. "5 someone," she said. "And no, they're not gone. They're asleep inside." He blinked. "You raised 5 children out here alone?" "Am I?" she asked. "Alone?" Dad stopped him. He looked down, adjusting his coat. "No, I reckon not." She turned to leave. "There's coffee in the morning. Weak but hot. If you're still here." He didn't say anything, but the look he gave her, quiet, worn, not pitying, followed her all the way back to the cabin. Subscribe and let the West keep teaching. By morning the wind had settled to a whisper, brushing fine snow off the roof in slow sighs. Martha stood at the stove, pouring hot water over the last grounds she could find in the tin. The scent of bitter coffee filled the room, earthy and sharp. The children stirred beneath their quilts. Mary was the first to sit up, rubbing her eyes. "Someone's in the barn," she said softly. Martha didn't turn. "I know." Mary hugged her knees. "You stay, for now?" Mary nodded like that answer made sense. The door opened slow a while later, careful not to wake the house. Cal stepped in with his hat in his hands, steam rising off his coat. He smelled of horse and straw and cold air. His face was red with windburn. She poured him a cup and didn't ask what H.E.D. done before he arrived here. Didn't matter yet. He took the coffee with a soft thank mine issue and stood near the wall. eyes on the floor, not the children. Martha noticed that small grace. "He'll be gone by noon," he said, "once the road's clear." "The road's not going to be clear till spring," she replied. "Drifts run 10 feet deep through the lower pass. You go out now, you die before supper." He nodded again, same way he had yesterday. Not arguing, not folding either, just taking it in. "I got hands," he said. "Can fix the barn door." "Who oughta? Cut wood if you've got trees left to fell." Martha watched him over her cup. His boots were worn near through, pants stitched at the knees. His knuckles were split, healing old. Not a man used to being taken in. Maybe not a man used to asking either. "You fix the door," she said, "and stack what would you find right. You can eat." He didn't smile, didn't thank her again. Just sipped the coffee like it was a kind of prayer. That day, Cal worked without being asked twice. He found the missing hinge for the barn door half-minus buried under drift and rigged the rest with scrap iron. He stacked the chopped logs behind the cabin wall neat and solid, like HED been raised by someone who cared how a thing was done. By afternoon, Martha found herself watching him through the window. The children watched too. Henry shadowed him for half an hour, trailing behind like a pup. Cal didn't say much, but he showed him how to check a beam for rotten the safe way to carry an axe. It wasn't fatherly, not even friendly, just something steadier than the wind. That was enough. In the evenings, Martha didn't talk more than needed, but each night Cal came to the door. She handed him a plate of beans or stew, and he took it with the same nod, quiet and respectful. He never came and passed the threshold unless she told him to. She liked that he understood silence, how to carry it without making it feel heavy. One night, after the children had gone to sleep and the wind was howling again, she stood at the door with her coat on, staring at the dark line of trees beyond the field. She didn't know what she was looking for. Maybe a sign she hadn't lost everything. Cal stood behind her on the porch. She hadn't heard him come up. He spoke soft, like not to scare her. "That boy of yours, Henry, smart, watches everything." She nodded. "He doesn't speak much. Don't need to. He'll grow into a man who does more than talk." She glanced at him. "You got children?" He was quiet a long time. "Had a boy once," he said. "Didn't raise him. Didn't get the chance." She waited, but he didn't say more. "I'm sorry," she said finally. He gave a slow shrug. "Weren't all my fault, but enough of it was." That settled between them like the snow falling from the eaves. Honest, heavy. "You stay in the winter?" she asked. "I stay. I work," he said. "I pull my weight." "That's not what I asked." He met her eyes. "I don't know yet. And he run in. But I don't know where I'm going either." Martha nodded once. The wind shifted. A flake of snow caught on her cheek and melted. "You stay, you help," she said. "That's how this goes." Cal looked out at the field. "That's fair." Inside, the fire cracked low. The children breathed, soft in their sleep. Outside, winter held on. But for the first time in weeks, the wind didn't sound like it was winning. Snow stacked high against the sides of the cabin as January dragged on, piling day after day in drifts that swallowed fence posts and bent trees low. Martha marked time by the slow grind of chores and the smell of sickness lifting from Mama's chest. He was breathing easier now. A little color had come back to his cheeks. The fire never went out. Cal stayed. Not all the way in, not quite out. He slept in the barn, even when the cold snapped hard. Said it was habit, that walls made him restless. But he took meals at the table now, spoke to the children when spoken to, showed Henry how to set a rabbit's snare and helped Truth mend a split in her boot with waxed thread and patience. He didn't try to soften her grief. That's what Martha came to notice. He didn't pity her. He didn't ask about her husband, didn't say what a shame it was, didn't fill the air with good minus-natured noise. He just worked, stayed quiet, and gave space for things to breathe. That felt more like kindness than anything she'd been offered in a long time. One evening, the light falling gold through the window, Cal was spitting kindling out back. Martha brought him a tin cup of hot broth. He took it, nodding his thanks, and they stood there a while, not touching, not looking at each other, both watching the sun dip low behind the ridge. "You ever think about leaving?" he asked after a time. She didn't answer right away. Some nights, when the wind sounds like it's got teeth. When I hear Ruth cry in her sleep and get to her fast enough. When I wake and forget HES gone just for a second. She sipped from her own cup. But where would I go? Would he take 5 children and a woman who knows more about field rotten chimney soot than city talk or Sunday dresses? He glanced at her. You're strong. She shook her head. I'm tired. He didn't correct her, just held the silence. She looked at him then, truly looked. His coat was patched, hands rough as tree bark, but his face under all that weather carried something gentle in the lines at the corners of his eyes. Not softness, something more like forgiveness. You? She asked. I've been leaving places most of my life, he said. Figured I was just built strong for staying. Thought if I stayed too long, folks to see the holes. Holes? Yeah, places where the good parts should be. That made her laugh quiet sudden. We all got holes. I just learned to patch mine with whatever was left over. He smiled then. Not wide, not young. Just honest. A few days later a letter came. The postman didn't ride all the way up the ridge anymore. Just left the mail in a box nailed to the fork in the road. Cal offered to fetch it. Martha let him. He came back with a single envelope, damp at the edges. It was from her husband's brother Thomas. She opened it at the table, the children watching. He was offering to take 2 of the children and said he had space on his farm in Kansas. Said it was better than starving. Said a woman alone couldn't raise 5 and make it through another season. He meant well, probably. He always did. Martha folded the letter and set it down. She looked across the table at Cal, who said nothing. What would you do? She asked. He took a long breath. Eamon I knew once said the hardest part about being strong was knowing when to fight and when to stay still. That sounds like a thing a man says when he doesn't want to pick a side. He met her eyes. It is, but it don't make it wrong. That night she didn't sleep. Sat by the stove watching the fire's glow flicker over the floorboards. In the quiet, she thought of all she had done to keep her children warm, fed, alive. She thought of the wind that never stopped and the man who walked into it without asking for anything in return. When dawn came, she stepped outside. The snow was soft again, heavy in the trees. Cal stood by the fence, arms folded, watching the sky. I ain't sending them, she said. He looked at her, the faintest trace of something like relief on his face. You sure? No, she said, but I'm doing it anyway. He nodded once. Slow. Then he said, What do you want from me, Martha? She didn't answer right away. I want someone who'll carry the water without being asked. Who knows how to listen when there's nothing left to say. Who doesn't run when things get cold. Cal swallowed. I can try. That's all I'm a skin. And she turned, leaving the door open behind her. March came like a warning, not a promise. The thaw didn't come in sunlight or birdsong. It came in slow drips from the eaves, in the stink of wet hay, and in the moan of the river straining under its ice. The wind lost its bite but not its voice, and the ground, still frozen deep down, gave no mercy. Martha began to move easier, though nothing in her life was truly easy. The children grew restless, eager to chase the muddy banks and the small signs of life clawing up through snowpack. She let them run when the sun stayed long enough. They needed to feel the world again. So did she. Cal stayed. He no longer slept in the barn. That changed quietly one night in late February when the cold crept in so deep the rafters groaned, and she opened the door without saying a word. He'd taken the floor by the fire without argument, and after that, he just stayed. Their lives wove together in small ways. He shaved at the basin each morning before Henry came out from under the quilts. She made a second pot of coffee without asking. She sewed up the tear in his shirt pocket where he kept a folded page of something too worn to read, but he carried it like it mattered. One afternoon, while Henry and Cal were fixing the fence, Martha stood near the old stump at the edge of the field and watched. Cal knelt in the dirt, showing the boy how to brace the post with his weight, how to wrap the wire so it bit him but didn't snap. His voice was calm, patient. She couldn't help but think this is what should have been. She turned before her eyes gave too much away. That night after the children were asleep, she asked him, You ever want to start over? He looked into the fire. Most days he'd say no. Thought I'd already run out my chances. And now? He didn't answer right off. Then he said, "Now I think maybe there's things left I haven't ruined." A log cracked in the stove. Martha felt her throat tighten, but she pushed it down. "Do you think I'm being foolish?" she asked. "Holding this land, keeping all of it, them." Cal leaned forward, elbows on knees. "I think foolish is just another word for brave when it's a woman doing what no one thinks she can." That stayed with her. But spring doesn't just bring new growth. It stirs up rot. Trouble rode into Cedar Hollow one gray morning in the form of Jed Harlan, the man who used to call himself a friend of her husband's. Hed worked timber with Jacob back in Arkansas and had followed him north for work, drink, and as it turned out, money. He came on a buckskin horse with a rifle strapped to his saddle and a mouth full of warnings. Said Jacob promised him a stake in the land before he died. Said he had a signed note, though no one ever saw. Martha stood in the yard while he shouted, her children behind her. Cal stepped out from the barn, quiet as always, arms loose at his side. "This ain't your fight," Jed spat. "She's clinging to it's not hers." Cal looked at Martha, waited. She said nothing. She wouldn't beg. But Cal stepped forward, slow and even. "You say you had a deal, but the man's dead. And if this land was part yours, you'd have been here helping dig fence posts last month." Jed's lip curled. "Who the hell are you to speak for her?" "I don't, but I speak for what's decent." The silence after that was long and dry. Jed looked between them, saw what was standing in front of him, to people who had nothing left to bluff with and nothing left to lose. "You'll regret this," he muttered. "No," Martha said. "I already did. Now I'm done." He left. Not fast, not slow, just enough to let them know he wasn't finished. But when he was gone, and the dust settled, Cal turned to her. "That was mine to do," he said. "You should have been the one to run him off." "You didn't speak for me," she said. "You stood beside me." Then she reached for his hand, cold, used and warm. Neither of them said another word. Inside, the fire still burned. The threat hung in the air for days, like a storm that hadn't broken. Martha didn't speak of it, and Cal didn't push. But each night, he checked the latch twice, kept the rifle near. He never said it out loud, but she saw the shift in him, the way his eyes scanned the tree line when he came in from the barn. How he took to walking the property at dusk, slow, quiet, like a man listening for something far off. Martha stayed busy. That was her way. She scrubbed every board of the porch, stitched new shirts for the children from old flour sacks, started seeds, and cut minus down in cans by the window. But it was just chores anymore. It felt like she was preparing something, making space for a life that might stay, not just survive. One more morning, Ruth brought in a pale pink flower, bent but whole. It was growing through the snow, she whispered. Martha cupped it in her hands like a secret. Spring was coming, whether the land was ready or not. Then Jed came back. It was just past dusk. The sun had slipped behind the ridge, and the trees worked sharp against the sky. Cal was in the barn brushing the gelding, Martha by the stove, stirring stew. She heard the hooves first, slow, uncertain, then the creak of saddle leather. She didn't move fast. She didn't scream. She picked up the rifle from its place beside the door and stepped out. Jed sat easy in the saddle, coat open, one hand resting on his hip. His eyes were mean with drink or spite or both. "I warned you," he said. "Told you what was owed." "It's not yours," she said. "You think standing here long enough makes it so?" Jed chuckled, but it didn't sound like laughter. "You think that man of yours scares me?" HES got the look of someone trying real hard to forget what HES done. From the barn, a shadow moved. Cal stepped into the open, hands empty. His face was still, but Martha saw the set of his jaw. "You come to take land, you'll leave with nothing," he said. Jed spat into the dirt. "That's so?" Cal took one step forward. "It is. But you'll leave alive. That's my offer." Jed's face twisted. He reached for the pistol on his belt. The crack of the rifle stopped him. Martha hadn't meant to fire, just meant to lift it, but her finger pulled, and the shot rang out into the trees, the sound splitting the quiet wide open. She'd missed on purpose, hit the dirt at his horse's feet. Jed jerked back in the saddle, swore. "You try again," she said, voice even. "I won't." The silence that followed was thick with breath. Jed looked between the two of them, her standing firm, Cal still and waiting. Then he turned his horse without a word and rode off into the dark. She let out her breath slow, hands shaking now that it was over. Cal walked to her, took the rifle gently from her hands. "You all right?" "I am now." She looked at him then, truly saw him not as a man passing through, not as the one who helped cut wood and carried water, but as someone who had quietly become part of her, of them. "You're not just passing through anymore," she said. "No," he replied. "Not if you'll have me." She didn't answer, just stepped close, rested her forehead against his chest, and let herself be still. In the weeks that followed, nothing more came of Jed. Maybe he realized he was outnumbered by more than just two. Maybe he knew that the land had chosen its own defenders, and HED never belonged to it. The spring brought green in fierce little bursts. The children ran wild, skinned to sun, laughter like something lost and found again. Martha planted the garden in long straight rows, same as always. But this year she didn't do it alone. Cal built a new fence around the plot, fixed the roof before the rains hit, carved a wooden whistle for Eli just because he asked. At night, when the house was quiet, they sat together by the fire, shed men's shirts, and HED carve or whittle, or just listen. There were no promises spoken aloud, none needed. One evening, with the first cottonwood fluff drifting through the air, Martha laid her hand over his. He looked at her, waiting. "I've stopped waiting for Jacob to come back," she said. "Stopped asking why he had to go. Doesn't mean I forget him. Just means I know how to live again." Cal closed his fingers over hers. "I want to stay," he said, "if you'll have me, not just as a helper." She smiled, small and full of something bright. "I know." The next morning, Ruth pressed a ring of wildflowers into her mother's hand and whispered, "It's a gift for your new stock." Martha tucked it away, heart full. They had no gold, no preacher, no witness but the sky. But something sacred had begun. The land shifted with the seasons, slow and honest. April rolled in with soft trains that cleared the last snow from the gullies. The river broke loose with a roar, tumbling chunks of ice downstream, and the children stood on the banks, pointing, cheering like it was a parade. Martha's hands grew warm again. Her shoulders eased from that winter-hardened posture of holding too much. The soil was damp and rich. She pressed seeds into it with care, thinking not only of food but of futures. Cal carved fence rails from a down pine tree. He didn't rush the work. He moved like he meant to stay, every post straight, every gate hinged tight. Henry followed him everywhere now. Asked questions, got answers. Evenings brought quiet, not the heavy kind from before, but something settled. Martha found herself humming while she cooked. She didn't notice until Ruth asked, "What's that song?" She hadn't known she was singing. Sometimes, when the children slept, she and Cal sat out under the stars on the porch steps. They didn't talk about what might come. They didn't need to. One night she asked, "What do you dream about?" He was quiet a while. Then a stretch of land not too big, just enough. A stove that don't go cold. Children laughing close by. A woman who knows how to keep bees. Martha smiled. "I don't keep bees." "You'd learn." "And you?" "It'd keep the fire going." That was enough. In May, a neighbor rode in a man named Keller from 2 ridges over. He heard about Jed Harlem making trouble. Said word was going around town that the widow on Hawk's Ridge had run him off herself. "Folks talk," he said, chewing a sprig of grass. "Some figure you got help. Some figure your age is made of something the rest of us ain't." Martha didn't reply, just offered him a plate of biscuits. After he left, Kel turned to her. "You all right with people knowing? I didn't do it for show." "I know, but it meant something." Folks who once pitied her now nodded in respect. Some even asked for help, how she had wintered without losing her, and how she raised 5 children without begging kin to take them in. She didn't have answers, just days behind her, each one survived. One morning in early June, Henry ran to the house shouting, "There's men near the ridge. 4 of them." Martha's stomach dropped. She reached for the rifle out of habit, heart thudding. Kel stepped beside her, calm. "They aren't." Henry shook his head. "Don't look it. They've got surveyor tools." Cal narrowed his eyes. Railroad men, maybe. They rode out to meet them. The men were polite enough, explaining they were scouting new lines for a possible northern track. Nothing decided. Just measuring. But when Martha heard the words government right minus of minus way, a chill ran up her spine. Later, back at the cabin, she stood near the stove and said, "If they come through here, we could lose the land." Cal rubbed a hand over his jaw. "Not without a fight. I don't want to live a life where fighting's the only thing keeping me standing." "You won't have to," he said. "Not now." That evening he brought something wrapped in cloth to the table. "I was gonna wait, but maybe there's never a perfect time." Inside was a thin silver ring, plain, smooth, shaped by hand. She looked at him, her heart steady and full. "I've got no preacher," he said. "No papers." "You've got me," she said. He reached across the table. She gave him her hand. Later they told the children together. Mary cried. Ruth cheered. Henry just nodded, like he'd known all along. The wedding lost in a church. It happened by the edge of the garden, the wind soft, the fields full of new green. Martha wore her hair down. Cal wore his only good shirt. They stood side by side, speaking quiet vows that weren't about promises they couldn't keep, but about carrying what came together. After Cal lifted Ruth and spun her around while Eli shouted with joy, Martha watched her children laugh, barefoot in the grass. For the first time in years, they looked like they belonged to a life bigger than survival. At dusk, she and Cal walked the edge of the field. Fireflies blinked low in the tall grass. The wind was warm now, brushing her cheek like a hand she trusted. She stopped walking and looked at him. "I never thought I'd feel like this again." "Like what?" "Like home was just a place, but a person." He kissed her brow gentle. "Well, build it, as many times as we have to." And they did. By the time the peaches ripened in late July, the cabin no longer looked like a place stitched together out of grief. It looked lived in. There were curtains now made from old feed sacks bleached in the sun. Cal built a porch swing from salvaged oak, and the children took turns on it until the rope squeaked. A row of jars lined the kitchen shelf, beans, corn, rhubarb, all sealed tight against the winter to come. Martha rose early each day, not out of fear anymore, but rhythm. She moved through her morning with ease, her steps lighter, her hands less clenched. She no longer counted every mouthful or stored her sorrow in silence. What had once been a house of holding on was now a house of living. Some nights she still woke from dreams where Jacob was alive, hammering in the barn, singing some half-minus forgotten song. And always in those dreams she'd feel herself smiling until the weight of reality returned. But it didn't crush her anymore. She'd learned something about grief. It didn't disappear. It just made room. And she had filled that room. Cal had taken to sleeping with one hand resting on her hip, not possessive, just present. It grounded her more than words ever could. In the evening she read to the children from the Bible or from the single worn volume of Pilgrim's Progress they'd kept through every move. Henry read now too, slowly but with more confidence than she'd thought possible after the year they'd had. One night after the others were in bed, Cal brought out something wrapped in a kerchief. "What's this?" Martha asked, brow raised. He handed it to her without a word. Inside was a small carved box, no bigger than her hand. She opened it and found a handful of letters, each folded neatly. "I wrote these before I ever knew if it'd stay," he said. "Things I couldn't say out loud. Things I thought I'd carry with me if I left." She looked at him. "Why give them to me now?" "Because I'm not going anywhere." Her throat tightened. She didn't read them, not then. She just held the box to her chest. The days grew longer, slower, golden. Martha found herself humming again, louder now, unafraid. She taught the children how to make jam from choked cherries, how to braid onions to dry in the rafters. She caught Cal watching her sometimes, like he couldn't believe she was real. "You look at me like you're waiting for me to vanish," she told him once. "I'm just making sure I remember every part," he said. In early August she missed her monthly. She waited before telling him, not out of fear, but the quiet kind of wonder she hadn't let herself feel in years. When she finally said it one evening while they shelled beans on the porch, he didn't speak for a long while. He just reached for her hand. "We'll need a bigger bed," he said. She laughed until tears ran down her cheeks. That night, she placed her hand low on her belly. It was too early to feel anything, but she swore something answered her. Word got around, as it always did in towns like Cedar Hollow. No one asked where a cow had come from anymore. He was the one who stayed. The one who built the fence, fixed the road, helped pull the stuck wagons out of the spring mud. Martha knew some still whispered, still speculated, but they whispered about everyone. She had learned that long ago. The only truth that mattered lived inside the walls of her home. In the way Cal looked at the children like they were his own. In the way Ruth had taken to calling him Pa without ever being told to. In the way the wind had quieted, finally, like it had made peace with them. One night, the children asleep in the stove cooling, Martha sat at the table with her journal. She wrote, "This land took nearly everything from me, but it gave something back I never expected, a second chance. A man who carries his past the way I carry mine, with care but not with shame. A home built not from stone or timber but from staying, from choosing each other, even when the cold comes, especially then." She closed the book and placed it on the shelf beside the ring of wildflowers Ruth had once woven. Outside, the night stretched wide and warm. Inside, the fire burned low but steady. Martha reached for Cole's hand. There was nothing left to prove, only everything to live for. "The trail bends ahead. Subscribe and follow it."